Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Andre and I'm your bookworm. And today, what a surprise, we have another book review. But I know that we always have book reviews, but I am planning some new videos. So watch the channel, maybe you'll get some new surprises once in a while. But don't worry, the major thing of this channel will always be reviews. So let's get on to it. And today it's actually a special one because it's not fantasy nor sci-fi. This one is honor of Halloween Past. I know it's been a while since Halloween and I have been meaning to give this review a lot earlier, but life just gets in the way, and so we're reviewing it now. The book we're actually reviewing is called The Last House on Needless Street by Catriona Ward. This book was recommended by a friend of mine and he said it was a great horror book, quite plot twisty towards the end and surprising at parts, but yeah, so I decided to read it and give it a go, and I'll tell you soon what I thought of it. This book was published in 2021, so 3 years ago, and the year it was published, it was nominated for plenty of awards. The Goodreads Choice Award for horror was one of them. It didn't win that one, however, it won the British Fantasy Novel Award for the best horror novel. On Goodreads, this book has gathered over 113,000 ratings and it averages on a score of 3.85. Now, I don't read much horror, so I don't know if this score is within the boundaries of what horror usually gets or if it's an outstanding score or a below average score. For me, for what I'm used to see, it seems a bit low. Anything below 4 is a bit worrisome, but I mean, sci-fi always usually gets lower scores compared to fantasy, and sometimes those books are just as amazing. So gotta take this with a grain of salt. But moving on to our housekeeping things, so we have our synopsis to read. If you're new, we're just gonna narrate the synopsis. If you don't want to hear anything about it, just skip to the time step that is floating around and you'll skip that whole part and get right into the review. Otherwise, stick around and you'll just hear me narrate it. This is the story of a murderer, a stolen child, revenge. This is the story of Ted, who lives with his daughter Lauren and his cat Olivia in an ordinary house at the end of an ordinary street. All these things are true, and yet some of them are lies. You think you know what's inside the last house on Needless Street. You think you've read this story before. In the dark forest at the end of Needless Street, something lies buried, but it's not what you think. And that's it. That's our synopsis. Quite short, but quite mysterious. And since we don't have any books from previously, since this is a standalone, let's just jump into the review, starting with plot. First thing I have to say is that reading this book was a journey. It started off pleasantly, and what I thought was going to be a sweet journey ended up next minute turning around and starting to get these very scary and creepy vibes. And then, just as you get used to this new status quo and you think, okay, I'm ready for this type of book and ready for what it might bring, boom, it changes again completely, but while being still coherent with itself, and looking back, everything still makes sense even when the status quo continues changing. And this really makes you think that maybe you shouldn't judge a book by its cover. And like I said, the changes weren't mind-blowing per se, however they were very coherent with the story, and every time your perspective would change, you would look back and you would think, okay, yeah, this is still coherent and it makes sense. I didn't feel betrayed as a reader, and that shows how Catriona Ward was able to read the plot and leave enough hints for you to realize once the plot twist happens that it was always there. The different points of view, which there are a couple of them, I don't want to say much because I would kind of reveal a bit of spoilers, but let me just say that the different POVs unveil the plot little by little, and every mystery just keeps getting unfolded with more that you read of those characters. And while at the same time, because you're reading more about those characters, you feel the stakes rising because you care about them, and therefore the tension rises. But I'll talk about tension a bit more on the writing style category, but for now, for plot, I'm gonna give it 5 out of 5. What about our characters? Like I said, we follow several different POVs, and we also get some flashbacks from several characters' pasts. There was a lot of S's in that sentence, and I think that helps us develop and connect with the characters. I was happy with most of the characters, aside from Olivia. I won't divulge much about this character per se, because spoilers, but I found it a bit distracting, and I know that the way it was written, it was purposefully to be like that, especially with the plot twists that happened further on. But I think the other characters had a bit more realism to them, and the emotions that were attached to these characters and the arcs they were going through felt a lot more real and therefore more relatable, and I could connect better, and therefore for me the stakes would be higher for them. I think there was only one small detail that didn't really feel like it was important for the characters, but it was used more as a plot tool. I'm just gonna say it was a certain fear of snakes that, yeah, I didn't feel like it was quite well integrated with the character and not that relevant. And then in the end, it was kind of used in a certain way, but not that greatly. Anyway, this category for me still holds quite a lot of quality, so I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 5. What about world building? I'm not very sure how to judge this category since technically this book is spent in our world, so one would think that as long as they describe our world well, then should get a good score, right? But I think it's a bit more nuanced because creating a world that is related with the horror genre relates a lot with creating that ambience, that tension, that thriller or that suspense that makes us feel like the stakes are rising just based on the environment they're on. And I think the author was able to provide a good ambience to the right places, both for the main house and the forest where a lot of the scenes happened. And when the story was happening in those scenes, they were very well described. I could totally imagine what was going on. But then we had some other places like a bar or a certain office where it felt more like taken out of a movie, so it didn't have as much detail. It felt more generic, more stereotyped. There weren't any paranormal or alien entities, let's say, in this book for me to judge if they were coherent with the world itself, if they made sense, or if it was completely incongruous. So for this category overall, I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 5. Pretty good, not astounding. This is probably a lower 4 compared to the characters, which I thought was a medium 4. On to writing style. I think the author was really good at exploring several themes within the horror genre. I enjoyed that, especially because a lot of the plot twists were involving those themes, and so they were subverting my expectations and making me realize how little I knew about certain themes of this book, which I think ultimately is good because it raises awareness for the themes in question that I don't want to reveal because it would be a major spoiler for this book. As for the prose, I thought it was a simple, not flowery or complex type of prose and quite direct. I do have to comment a bit about the pacing, because whereas I thought that the building of tension was good, and with each revelation it made this fear for certain characters more and more. However, at the same time, I thought there were some other scenes where we would jump around to parts that didn't really seem to have much impact and didn't feel important, and that would kind of break the momentum. Not to confuse with scenes where nothing bad happens, but there's still that ominous feeling. I think those scenes are important because they allow you to feel tension, and then the release because nothing really happens, but there's that danger. And then once the scenes where the danger actually happens, you're not as expecting, so you feel more invested and therefore more afraid. So for this category, I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5. And for a last category, which is enjoyment, I think that is very subjective. I mean, this category is always very subjective, but I think it depends a lot on if you like that tension feeling, that edge of your seat kind of feeling of what is going to happen next, because this book is filled with that. I do enjoy reading these type of books with this type of tension, and because I was reading this book close to Halloween, it made the perfect setting for me to feel that vibe. Except when the book would jump to a certain character that I mentioned before, then my enjoyment would decrease a bit, but still it was fair enough. It's not that type of book where I just want to read it all the time. I'm creating excuses just to go and read, but still I was happy when I picked it up. Maybe towards the end, when the revelations started happening, the plot twists, my enjoyment was rising quite a lot and my interest, but I don't think it ever reached the peak of enjoyment. So for this category, I'm also going to give a 4 out of 5. And that leads us to the end of our review. Just as a refresher, we have 5 for plot, 4 for characters, 4 for world building, writing style, and enjoyment. And that gives us a final score of 4.2 out of 5. For me, this was a good horror book. I think it explores some very good themes, and I think it definitely makes us as the reader think a lot about our assumptions when we think about characters or people and judging them with little information. Is it the best horror book that I've read and that everyone should read? I can't really answer that because I haven't read that many horror books. However, I've read some very good ones, and I think this one stands quite high, but maybe not the best. But if you know of other horror books, then please let me know. I'm very curious. Maybe I'll read some other horror books. I know, of course, Stephen King. I've read several books of his, but I actually never delved into the horror genre in Stephen King. So which one is the best? Let me know. Comment down below. And if you're new, don't forget, subscribe, like the content, and you'll be seeing me on Thursdays and Sundays, okay? See you soon!